Thank you all. Thank you both for joining. And before we start, I want to wish Shiraz congratulations. You graduated today, right?
Yes, I did actually. I just got back from my commencement, so sorry if I'm in the car right now, but I'm just coming back from it.
That's awesome. Is that your the I don't know what you call it, sash or the robe, the hood?
Yeah, there's like one that you get for a master's, and there's a different one for bachelor's and so on.
Awesome. Cool. That is very cool. So we got real live action. There is light at the end of the tunnel. We have Omaru, who has just finished up his first year of business school, is about to start his internship. So I am very excited to introduce these folks and kick off today's panel. So maybe just to start, Omaru, if you want to just tell us about yourself, maybe you can just tell us, what's your tell us a little bit about your background. So maybe your educational background, what you're doing, your jobs that you've had.
Yeah. Anita, Coach Anita, thank you for having me. Shiraz, congratulations. That's must be amazing now to be finally done and back into the world again. um, well, again, my name is Omaru. I'm originally from New York City, from Staten Island, New York. I'm a first generation American. My parents are from Sierra Leone. And so, as Coach India said, I'll be interning this summer. I'll be interning at Pfizer this summer as a pharmaceutical marketing MBA associate. And I'm also a second year MBA student at Simon Business School, where I'm also the president of Simon Life Sciences, and I'm also a Bennett career pair. So prior to business school, I actually got my undergraduate studies from St. Lawrence University in chemistry. And while I was there, I did some research in organic chemistry. I was working with nipetolactone. So if anyone has cats, can think about like catnip. The main ingredient of catnip is actually nipetolactone. And so what I was doing is basically taking a bunch of nipetocataria, which is where catnip comes from, and then extracting that and isolating nipetolactone, and then making different like insect repellents from it. And then followed my passion for medicine and drug discovery and kind of organic chemistry. I went into a PhD program in organic chemistry at Indiana University. There I worked on two projects. One was like an Alzheimer's project where I was working with the University of Cambridge. And the second one was a hardcore organic chemistry methodology project, which is too much to get into right now. And then I also was taking some classes at the Kelley School of Business where I obtained my certificate in Business of Life Sciences. There I kind of really learned about what commercialization was and kind of like why the business side of like pharma was really interesting, even medical device field. So then I realized like through my PhD, I was in my third year, and then I thought to myself, you know what, you finish your quals, you can just go in to the pharma to really get hands-on experience of like using your degree. So I wanted to get big pharma experience. So I ended up going to Novartis. There I was able to work on cross-functional teams with like chemists, biologists, biophysicists, the whole gambit of scientists, really learning more about what pharma was and also learning more about the business side. So there I was networking, really meeting people. And then now I'm, kind of in between there. I was working as director of fundraising for a nonprofit while at Novartis. I'll talk about that later. And then ended up at Simon. So yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
Wow, very cool. I know we have some animal lovers in the group. So catnip, I did not know that about you. Thank you. Shiraz, if you want to, could you tell us a little bit about your background? It's also diverse.
Yeah, sure. So, hi everyone. My name is Shiraz Bheda. Um, I am, I guess I've lived in New York City since 2014 when I attended college, and just now graduated from a local university in the area called Stevens Institute of Technology. So I guess a little bit about my path. It's just actually very different um, when I was kind of starting my career versus how I ended up in life sciences. So I graduated from University of Texas with a double major in both finance and accounting, and I went straight into, I guess, like quantitative investment strategies within the markets, within the financial markets. And so I started off my career as a commodities trader, and then eventually moved into more equity research and equity modeling, and then finally ended up in a hedge fund where I worked on investment strategies, primarily quantitative and macro-focused investment strategies. And so the nature of my work for almost a decade was primarily transactional, as is most financial industry jobs. And I kind of really found that I liked the more quantitative aspects of my work. And I wanted to kind of expand my skill set there, which is why I decided to return to graduate school and pursue a Master's of Science degree in analytics. And so I guess while I spent my time here at Stevens, I learned about the role of precision medicine, and kind of the world of highly customized and personalized medicine that we're going to be heading towards. And I also saw that, similar to where finance was 10 years ago, we're right now on the cusp of a large, in terms of secular innovation growth that's going to take place in healthcare. And it's going to be really driven by of how we customize personalized healthcare solutions. So, I just remember that when I started my career in finance, there was a lot of skepticism about implementation of AI and machine learning towards finance. And now, fast forward almost 10 years later, and we're in this world where it's largely being driven by AI and machine learning. Look at how the markets are being transacted. And so I see that rate of change taking place in healthcare, and I wanted to be a part of that. So over the course of my graduate studies, I applied for and was admitted to the Center for Precision Medicine and Genomics at Columbia University, thanks in large part to the Life Sci program that you are all in. And after I finished my summer there, I had some really interesting research ideas, because I was finding that the quantitative methods and methodologies that I'd learned in my previous career, I was able to apply them towards the study of genetic research, specifically in the identification of rare diseases, because there's a lot of innovative and creative statistical analysis that you can implement, particularly within the field of Bayesian machine learning, which is very popular in healthcare. That coming from a perspective of quantitative analysis in finance, I have a strong familiarity with implementation of quantitative and algorithm-based solutions to everyday problems. So, I wanted to continue that research. I continued in my final year of graduate school part-time with CPMG, and then at the end of the year, I gave a presentation on this random forest algorithm that I developed that helps in identifying rare genes that tend to have these rare mutations that are associated with kidney disease. And so they were happy with my results, I guess, and so they made me a full-time offer, which I accepted, and I'll now be working at now that I'm finished with school. So that's just a little bit of where I'm at.
Very exciting. You've converted your internship into a full-time offer, and it sounds like you've really been able to combine both your quantitative background as well as some industry, big picture thinking to look to say, hey, I want to be a part of this field. I see that it's growing. So we may come back to that a little bit. We earlier heard a little bit about crypto, and so maybe we'll just have a set of random questions at the end around hot topics today. But I do want to bring it back to career pivots. Omaru, you started describing a little bit about when you were a graduate student in organic chemistry. You started taking classes at the business school. Can you talk a little bit more about what drove some of this shift toward saying, business is actually the path that I want to take? So that's a big step to decide to leave your academic degree and pursue a very different path.
Yeah, I mean, for me, the reason I started taking classes there was I was actually working on a patent for my Alzheimer's work. And so I was working on basically alpha-synuclein, and we had this new dye that I created. And basically we're working with University of Cambridge, where they would put the dye into mice and they would image where the alpha-synuclein aggregates were. And so during this patent, I realized I had no clue anything to do with this process besides like, I'm gonna write science. And then my supervisor at the point was like, you should probably learn about what else is going on around it and how we could commercialize this potentially. And so then there was this course at the Kelley School of Business at Indiana, and there was some, I think maybe fourth years that took it prior to that, and they were saying that you should take it. That'll give you a better understanding of like what it is to commercialize a product from the chemistry perspective. So yeah, that's kind of like how I ended up there. I think I hit all the questions right.
Yeah. Okay. So sounds like there was a push from your advisor to learn more about just the commercialization process. You found the right class, and sounds like you really liked the class.
Yeah.
Great. Shiraz, so you took a different perspective where And I am quite fascinated where you, and we talked about this yesterday as well, you said you talked about the secular changes in the industry. Can you tell us a little bit more about what you mean by this? Maybe what were some of the articles or papers that you were reading to give you a different perspective? Because you're coming far from healthcare. And where did you get the information to realize, to see that healthcare was going to be growing?
Yeah, I mean, I credit a Dr. Mila Rasuli, who is also active in the LifeSci program, and she's the person that I think of as my mentor at CPMG, and she really kind of helped guide me and kind of point me in the right direction in terms of big ideas. And I think I just, had a strong support system. Obviously, I have a fantastic wife who's extremely patient with my endeavors and to
And is she
pursue
driving
her.
you right now?
She's also driving me, yeah. So I really lean on her, and she's super, super. So you have the important people, but I guess so. What do I mean by secular growth? So what I'm talking about is essentially, we hear the term precision medicine, right? So what does that mean? That means that we're heading to a world in which, two people with the exact same disease or maybe the exact same injury will need completely different solutions that are customized to that particular individual. And so you're talking about solutions that are specific to a person's gene set, right, or genomics. And so that implies, I guess, analysis and reading of a significant amount of data. And just to kind of give you a size of the scale, a sense of the scale of data, for those who are not familiar with analyzing genetic data, so a simple study that only covers, a few hundred people, right? Well, first of all, you have to analyze those people who have a particular disease that you're analyzing along with their parents. And so that multiplies the number of subjects by 3. And then the amount of sequencing, amount of space that you need, computational space to store this information, depending on whether you're sequencing a person's a genome or doing a whole exome. So I think the difference between whole exome sequencing and whole genome sequencing is the exome is just the aspect of your that only handles the creation of proteins that carry out tasks in your body, and then the genome is the entire genetic structure. So the exome is only 1%, right, of your DNA. But to get a really comprehensive view of your entire DNA blueprint, if you're storing the data that is transcribed from the nanobots that analyze a whole genome sequence of an entire individual. So for perspective, that's probably, I don't know, depending on what type of computer, but you can see, if you're scaling into the hundreds, right, in terms of hundreds of terabytes, right, like the dozens of terabytes, and that is a massive amount of information to process and actually make sense of, and it's noisy information. So there are certain papers that have just now come out, and really it's like maybe 5 years ago. Again, Dr. She gave me a paper that is written by, it's called Samoka. It look at the spectrum of autism-related diseases and link them to genetic mutations, and it makes an attempt to create a reference table in order to compare, I guess, the rate of mutations in certain genes within the people with various autism-related diseases by making this direct comparison. So, in theory, if you know about statistics, it's not that difficult to do it. But what was interesting is that nobody had tried to create these reference tables before. And so that just gives you an idea of how early it is in terms of this type of thinking, right? And a lot of these types of statistical tools are just now being created because only in recent years has technology advanced to the point where they are able to from our DNA code. Now that we're able to capture, detailed information about our DNA code, both the normal functioning parts and the mutation parts, at a much greater level of detail than ever before, that opens up the possibility of moving towards a world in which precision medicine can become a reality. But you need to have the right statistical tools. You need to be able to work with people that are very behind it.
You know, this is the second talk. Thank you. This is earlier today we heard from Emmanuel Cruz, who's at A2A Pharmaceuticals, a fellow intern alum, and he was talking about cheminformatics. So what I believe you're talking about is bioinformatics. So it's fascinating to me that there is still so much to be discovered, that we're just getting started here, because I think back to the human genome that was uh, being unveiled in the early 2000s when I was in graduate school, and some of my research was funded by the Structural Genomics Project, which was translating the results of the human genome into protein structure using NMR technology, not both X-ray crystallography and NMR technology, so that once you know what it looks like, you can make a prediction around the function, or get better predictions around function. I kind of thought that's it, but clearly there's a lot of data to be mined, and sounds like Shiraz is just getting started. Cool.
Yeah, even just to like hop in about like some of the genomic like things, there's like Foundation Medicine that's like out of Cambridge. They just got bought out by Roche, and this is a company that like that kind of revolutionized like looking at cancer. So basically they're able to use their gene analysis tools to figure out what kind of cancer someone has. So I feel like every day it's getting more and more like more data out there. So even when Shiraz is talking about this table, the reason there was no table is because there was no way to store this data. So like even if you wanted to run this, there was no way to store it. So as the AWS and all these kind of like cloud services get better and better, that's the further that science can go, honestly.
Fascinating. Foundation Medicine also partners with Flatiron Health, which is a New York City based company that works with real world evidence. Very cool. All right, so to bring it back a little bit to some of these career pivots, both of you decided that you to get advanced degrees. So what made you realize you needed to get the degree? And I'll start with Omaru. What, you had to, why not just go into business right away?
I think for me, what I realized was when I was director of fundraising at Leaders of Tomorrow, I realized like I would be fundraising and I didn't really have the business acumen to kind of be super successful. At least for me, it felt like I was in these rooms, I was having these great conversations, meeting people, but I wasn't able to kind of use my like financial acumen, right? Like even someone asked me about the P&L, and I remember the first time someone asked me, I was at a fundraising event and someone asked me, "What's the P&L look like?" And I was like, okay,
What's a P&L?
right. And I remember just going like, all right, I need to find a way to speed up and accelerate like learning about this business side. And so I ended up going to business school just to really hone in on that. I can do math, I can do science. I just needed to learn like what it is to do business and what's the language I needed to speak to be successful there.
Nice. You mentioned Leaders for Tomorrow, Leaders of Tomorrow. You said this is a nonprofit that you were just volunteering with. Is that right?
Yeah, so this is through the National Black MBA, and so Leaders of Tomorrow is their arm that looks at bringing like financial literacy, and I forgot what the other arms are, but it's like financial literacy, I guess student engagement, and then there's 2 or 3 other arms that they also work on there. So it was really, honestly, it was really cool, and honestly that was another big thing for me to go to business school. Was I was working with people who had MBAs who were telling me like, you would be successful if you really want to take this seriously. You really should go in, learn about what it is to do business, and then take that science brain that you have and use it there as well, because it'd be really helpful.
Very cool. So just because it doesn't have to be in your main line of work when you realize that there's a different path that you may want to pursue. Sounds like, yeah, in your case, just volunteer work.
Yeah.
So thank you. Shiraz, how did you realize that a master's degree would be helpful for you to further your pursuits?
Yeah, I guess for me at least, I guess my perspective was, I guess, a very, I don't know how to really describe it. I guess linear would be the best way to categorize the way in which my idealized career path was presented to me as I finished my undergraduate degree, right? So in undergrad business, what they do is they teach you that, what you're trying to do is you're trying to go work for the big banks. And then if you do that well, as an analyst, working day and night, then eventually you'll, go and work at, a large asset management firm where basically the prestige of your job is determined by the size of the assets that you're managing. And so I guess that is what I had been trained to think of in terms of just how I defined success and fulfillment from the undergraduate perspective. And I guess just at some point along the way, um, I just kind of realized that I didn't want my life to be as transactional as the path that was laid out to me in undergraduate. And I wanted to kind of see what else is out there. I knew that I had these skill sets, but I didn't really know how they could be applied other than to use them in like the supplemental way, which was, doing this cool and interesting analysis as a way of making sound investment decisions and ultimately making money, right? So everything kind of boiled down to, right, if you're anything related to investments and these types of jobs that, it's all about transaction. It's all about how much money are you making. And in a way, it's about performance. And performance aspect doesn't bother me, but it was really just more about how, I guess it was just like a high transaction type business. And I really enjoyed kind of like creating and developing these tools and watching these terms of, I guess, like research aspects, these thematic research aspects unfold. And then there was a little bit of that in business, but there are times when it can be secular growth, like what I'm seeing in healthcare, and there are times where it can be cyclical. And so there's upswings and then there's downswings, and then it kind of repeats itself. So I guess though that's a bit of a long-winded way of saying that I just wanted to expand my skill set, particularly in the computational analysis department, and see what other ways there were in which I could apply these skill sets out there. And that's kind of how I learned about precision medicine, right? This was a little bit into my first year in my master's program. I learned about this and I thought, oh, that's kind of interesting. I wonder if anything I know could be applicable. And so, it really started with just these school projects that I would mess around with and see, okay, I'm going to take this financial concept. It probably won't work. And then I would be surprised, like, oh, it actually is producing fairly significant results. I'm looking at some pretty cool charts and I really didn't expect that to happen. And so that's where I decided, what's the harm in pursuing an internship in this space and actually really focusing on it for a summer. And I think that was really the definitive turning point for me, was the summer at CPMG, where I really kind of left that summer with the confidence that actually this skill set can really be applied. And I think I've got this unique perspective coming from a different field, where I can kind of come up with some innovative new strategies and ways to perform the analysis. And that really is, the rest is history, right? So it really just came down to, I had an interest and I wanted to develop it further. And, you just don't know where the paths take you in school, but that's where it led me.
For sure. Most of the time when we have career path talks, one of the big observations is, wow, people's paths are non-linear. Yours, but both of you, it's a little different. That there is there's linearity, there's a bit of logic to it going forward, as opposed to kind of looking in the rearview mirror and applying the logic. But you are also open to the possibilities, curious about the things that you were experiencing, learning both at the high level, both in your day-to-day, whether it was on the job or for in volunteer engagements. One question that comes up a lot is networking. We covered it a little bit yesterday, a little bit today. What role did networking play for both of you in where you've ended up today? And maybe we'll start with Shiraz. So I think you even mentioned a mentor. So what role did networking play?
Yeah, I think that this is the rule for every industry, right? As a general rule, find someone that, um, sees a little bit of themselves in you, maybe a younger version of you, and really just genuinely cares about your personal and professional development. Because that can make all the difference in the world, right? And so I'm really fortunate that I was able to come in. And, Gila is great. There's other people, Sarat, David Faisal is director of bioinformatics at TPMG. There's a lot of people it's a very strong support system. I'm very fortunate to be working at the place that I'm working at. But I would also say that just in general, networking is really crucial, right? Because, I came in with these ideas, and these internships just didn't come out of nowhere because, one obvious gap in the story I'm presenting to you is that I had some ideas and I worked on some school projects, but by and large, I'm trying to enter a field in which I was very light on experience in. And so how did I solve that? Well, so the answer was I knew that I had a lot of confidence in my ideas. And I just knew that it was a matter of someone giving me a shot. And so that really boils down to networking, right? And so the first thing I did is I reached out to labs, both at Stevens and at other schools. I did some work for some labs at Yale. And I really just volunteered myself of, being willing to learn about different aspects just to kind of put together some experience in order to make a case for, this is an actual genuine interest that I believe in, and I really do believe I can make impact. And this is the proof, right? I'm putting in the effort into it. And so, even just from those school projects and from that volunteer work at it's like the Health and Artificial Intelligence Lab, the Health and Artificial Intelligence Lab at Stevens, as well as there are some smaller labs at Yale within I guess, the genetics department that I also did work for. Just being able to kind of have those conversations and interviews, people are able to get a sense of, okay, this guy is putting in the time. And also, LifeSci is an incredibly important tool. So LifeSci was obviously extremely important for me in terms of helping me find CPMG, because getting access to this type of network and actually gaining perspective from other people is very important. And I think we had talked about this before, Anita, about how the development of LifeSci is just one of a number of initiatives being undertaken by New York City as a way of pushing and developing its biotech scene, right? Which is very much in its infancy, but it's part of like a 10-year, $500 million initiative by the city of New York. And the end goal of this is, it's also related to the New York Center for Genomics. The end goal is to ultimately put New York City on the map in terms of being one of the big biotech hubs, not just in New England, but or the Northeast, but also in the entire country, right? Because 5-10 years ago, when you thought biotech, you thought maybe San Diego, and you really thought Boston, right, in terms of New England, because they're the ones that have the Broad Institute, which is the collaboration between MIT and Harvard, and so they're the one that's doing a lot of groundbreaking stuff. In terms of the fields of genetics and life sciences. And so now you see New York City entering the scene, and you see the schools like Columbia and NYU and Stevens and all the other schools that are in the area putting together collaborative initiatives in order to further I guess, New York City's profile. And so that is why, as this initiative is taking place, it's really, really important for us as people who aspire to build careers in life sciences to be a part of that developmental phase, right? So that's why I would say networking is extremely crucial at this juncture in terms of developing the biotech scene in New York City.
You could be your natural spokesman for the spokesperson for the NYC EDC, the Economic Development Corporation. Thank you to our sponsors. Omaru, what role has networking played in your career?
I think similar to Shiraz, honestly, don't have much else to add. But for me, like, first generation American, parents didn't really know what was going on in the US. I had to like network my butt off to get to where I am today. So for me, every step of the way, I had to look for mentors. I had to look for people who knew a lot more than I did. I can't sit here and tell you I did this all myself. Of course, it was a lot of hard work, but it definitely was a lot of networking, a lot of meeting people, and being willing to put myself out there. Going, hey, even my job at Novartis, I remember I emailed someone, a St. Lawrence alum, and was like, hey, can we just have a coffee chat? We had a coffee chat. He was like, I really enjoyed like how you described your chemistry, what was going on. There's a position that opened up. Why don't you go and interview for it? And then I'm being pretty successful. So I think it's all about like understanding your network and really, taking the time to meet people in your network. Like this kind of event here is like where you get all these speakers, and like someone once told me that like most people won't even reach out to the speakers. Most people will just kind of see a speaker and go on. Whereas I would recommend, if you're interested in what someone said, email them, message them. People love talking about the cool things they did. So networking has been critical to where I am. So that's kind of like my 2 cents to it.
Fabulous. Thank you. So I'm going to turn it over to the audience to see what questions you have. And there is a question that's come from Bart, and he's asked, this is for Shiraz, what is being done, or what do you hope can be done in order to make precision medicine more accessible and less for only those who can afford it?
Yeah, so I mean, actually, there are a number of tools that can be developed as part of the overall computational analysis aspect of making precision medicine a reality, um, that are basically cheaper versions of I guess various stages of translating um, genetic data from the initial study phase over to, I guess, the publication, and then ultimately the implementation in terms of clinical recommendations, right? So, for example, there are certain projects where what you find in analyzing genetic data sets is that they're very noisy. So what do I mean by that? That means that there's X% of data within those data sets that is just artifacts, right? Because these nanobots, what they do is they transcribe what they're seeing, and they're not always 100% accurate. And then this is kind of like an issue that you see in genetics and a few other fields. And so, there are, for example, expensive ways that add to your overhead costs that can help verify the accuracy of these results, or you can come up with some innovative, computationally based machine learning tools in order to infer what percent of this data set is correct or not, right? And obviously, if you're able to come up with something like that that is replicable and ultimately more reliable in the long term, and you're able to prove this through statistical significance tools or through these types of tools, this would obviously be something that you can imagine, right? Would reduce the overhead costs and ultimately pass a lower cost on to the end users. And so this is kind of what I mean when I say that we're still very much in the early stages of developing computational tools and software in order to really flesh out these ideas and ultimately lead to a lower cost for end user, which would improve the accessibility of precision medicine for more people around the world. I mean, that is, any industry, right, that is being disrupted by a new technology, that industry is going to be disrupted in a positive way, generally with low cost, right? So you think of like solar, right? You think of exploration and production, right? You think of lots of different ways in which there's this new disruptive technology that comes in and it makes it more accessible. And that's just kind of what I see happening in healthcare over the next 5 to 7 years.
Disruptive trends. I love that. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense when you talk about the cost coming down. Omaru, maybe a different spin on this similar question. What would you say? Oh, I'm sorry. I see that Bart, did you want to follow up, Bart? I see your hand is raised.
Yeah, if possible. Thank you so much, Shiraz, for sharing. My follow-up question is, how likely are hospitals and doctors in accepting these new forms of assessing diseases and assessing what should be done? Because in my experience, doctors are pretty hesitant in accepting new technology. And I'm just curious what your experience has been so far and
so
what are doctors saying? Yeah.
Yeah, of course. So I mean, my perspective right now is the same as yours. But like I said, I come from a different field. And so I bring in a unique perspective of, I came from a world of, a couple years after the financial crisis, and I was a commodities trader. And so I'm sitting with these other commodities traders. And you can imagine, they're hearing about AI machine learning, and they're extremely skeptical as well. And so, that process of learning and understanding and accepting those changes, it takes time, right? It takes time to build trust. But if you're able to come up with good ideas that can be replicated, then over time you're able to erode those walls of, doubt, and build up that trust. And that is the cycle of secular growth that took place in quantitative finance that I'm betting my career on will take place in healthcare. Because yes, you are absolutely right. There is still plenty of skepticism, but what we can do in order to wear down that skepticism is we can build these really reliable and effective tools, and we can show that they work, and then we can have them published, right? And then we can not only stop, we won't just stop with the publication aspect of it. We will push past the publications and we will move into implementation. And so hopefully we can get to that world where the doctors have a lot of confidence in these tools, and that's kind of the big hope, right, for where the industry goes in the future.
And Shiraz, just to hop in what you're saying, like honestly, you see every day there's a new startup that's working on AI within the pharma space or in the life sciences space. So I think it's, even from like, for me, from a Pfizer perspective, going in an MBA role, like they have a new product that's launching that it's based on AI, and they're able to diagnose this disease using their AI. And they've shown that it works way faster and better than an actual human doctor. So I feel like when there's more and more examples of that, there's no reason for them not to adapt.
That's so interesting. It makes me think about a friend of mine who started an AI-based company to read X-rays, a diagnostic, I think X-rays or radiograms a few years ago, and couldn't get the funding, so the business couldn't take off. But I wonder if now maybe more the time is right because of what you both have mentioned about the tools and possibly funding. Huh. Sorry for my little indulgence. Well, last question for you both. What advice do you have for interns? One or two quick tips as they start their internship. Omaru?
Yeah, I'll go first. I mean, my advice, take it all in, ask questions. Don't be afraid. I know a lot of people say this and you kind of like forget, but like ask questions. You need to ask questions because, like there are things that you'll learn from asking questions, and there are things that the person you're asking the question to will actually learn too. So I feel like if you ask the right question or you keep asking questions, you'll get the answers you want. And because end of the day, it doesn't hurt, right? For me, that's the perspective for me. So just throwing it out there.
I mean, I would just say, oh, sorry, go ahead.
All you.
Okay, so I would just say, just be yourself, be confident, and just know your value, right? Like know what you bring to the table, and know that you have this particular skill set, and really just believe in yourself, right? Believe in the hard work and believe in the value that you add, and just believe that you will be recognized for your hard work and your efforts.
Great. Thank you, gentlemen, for coming on today. Shiraz, even as you were in transit and in full academic regalia. Thank you, Omaru, for making time. It's always fun to speak to you. You are both very articulate about your career and intentional. Thank you.